Threats and intimidation, arbitrary detention, imprisonment without charges or fair trials, beatings and torture. Those are the kinds of abuses that Palestinians have accused the Israelis of for decades. It's what they expect from their enemy. It's not what they expect from their brother. When Yasser Arafat returned to Gaza back in 1994, Palestinians dreamed that this was the birth of their own independent democratic state. Arafat was welcomed home as a liberator. That was then. This is now. Under pressure from the Israelis and the Americans, Arafat has cracked down on suspected Islamic militants in the areas under his control. But he has also arrested and jailed his critics, including journalists and human rights workers, who say that Arafat's Palestinian Authority is as abusive as the Israelis were.
Seems to me that today it's a little bit worse.
Bassem Eid is a Palestinian. For years, he worked for a human rights organization investigating Israeli abuse of Palestinians. Today, he's still investigating abuse, only this time his target is Yasser Arafat's Palestinian Authority.
When you talk about these abuses, how many people are we talking about? A handful, a dozen, 100?
We are talking about hundreds of people. We are talking about hundreds who already kept in jail for between 1 year to 3 years without charges, without trial.
Would you say that beatings and torture are routine treatment for prisoners?
Yeah, it seems to us very common. Everybody will be arrested, will be beaten. Never mind which kind of offense he already committed.
How many prisoners have died while in custody of the Palestinian Authority?
Since the coming of the Palestinian Authority until today, there are 15 people.
One of them was a wealthy businessman named Yusuf al-Baba, who was arrested and imprisoned by the Palestinian Authority last January. By February, he was dead. According to his brother, it was a shakedown. When Yusuf refused to pay, they killed him. He told us there were holes in his brother's arms, burns on his arms and legs, and bruises on his head, his ear, and his neck.
This is a kind of torture that I've never seen practiced anywhere. They used a drill on his arms, and then they put him in water and electrocuted him. The people who did this aren't human beings. They're monsters.
We wanted to know how something like this could happen, so we asked the Secretary General of Arafat's cabinet, Ahmed Abed Rahman, who told us that the reason Yusuf al-Baba died had to do with his kidneys.
He has something in his kidney, but it is not, they are not doctors, they are soldiers or like that. So they tortured him, then he has his kidney spoiled, and he died. That's right.
We saw they did torture him.
Yes, sir.
That's not what you do to someone who has a kidney problem.
They tortured him. I cannot deceive you and say they did not. They tortured him, yes.
Is that something that's condoned by Chairman Arafat?
No, nothing at all. Impossible.
So how can it take place?
The limits for the officers, the limits for the people, it's not very clear. So they took the authority in their hands.
People who ran the prison.
Yes, it happened.
And it's happened too often, according to the international organization Human Rights Watch. In a new report, the organization says that the first 3 years of Palestinian Authority rule have been characterized by widespread, arbitrary, and abusive conduct by Arafat's security forces, which have grown into an army of nearly 40,000. That's one cop for every 50 Palestinians, reportedly the highest ratio in the world. And where did they learn such abusive behavior?
The most of the methods came from the Israeli interrogation wings, because most of the Palestinian investigators today were the victims of the Israeli torture in the past.
So you have people who were tortured by the Israelis?
And today, unfortunately, they are torturing their own people. it seems that they become as a good students by learning these methods.
Dr. Iyad Siraj, who heads a citizens' rights group in Gaza, knows about abuse from first-hand experience. He's been arrested by the Palestinian Authority 3 times. The 3rd time was the worst. His crime?
You had written a letter to President Arafat?
Yes.
And that's why they arrested you?
Yes.
I don't understand. Why would they arrest you because you wrote a letter to President Arafat?
Because the letter was critical of the authorities' conduct.
And for that, Dr. Siraj says he was beaten so severely they fractured his spine. But the beating was not the most painful thing for him.
I was interrogated by Israelis several times. I was interrogated by my enemy. It was something to be proud of. But when I was interrogated by own Palestinian people, and when I was facing fabricated charges, and when I was beaten by my own Palestinian people, the pain was really so horrific. Not because of the beating, but because of, these are my brothers. How can we do this to each other? I know stories of people who were in the same cell, locked up in Israeli jails. And today, one is in the Palestinian prison and the other is his torturer. Psychologically, it makes people feel that you cannot trust this world anymore. Because this is my brother. How come he turned to be my enemy?
Fatme Sobeh has been asking the same question ever since the Palestinian Authority came to her door and arrested her husband, a university professor. He had made the mistake of putting 2 questions about corruption at the Palestinian Authority on an exam. He's been imprisoned ever since. For a while, he was on a hunger strike. He was also tortured.
When I first saw him, I was shocked. I couldn't believe that it was my husband. He's a large man, and he had lost 44 pounds. This was very difficult for me. I wish that I'd never seen him like that.
Did he tell you how he had been treated?
Yes, he did, but I don't want to say.
You don't want to say?
According to Ahmed Abed Rahman, the reason the professor was arrested is simple.
He should not do this thing, to ask students in the university about the corruption.
Is he charged with anything?
No, till now he did not.
So he's in jail because he said to his students, talk about corruption. That's
in
what
our
you do in a free society.
In our society, we should keep things, when we are building this society, not like what happened in America or in Israel itself. I speak with you frankly. If you ask the students, this is a question, and tell them what corruption means, what is written, what these things, they will have their stones and go to the streets.
Some people have already taken to the streets to voice their opposition to corruption. Outside City Hall, we came across these truck drivers. One of them told us that corruption is the reason that these men aren't working, and that only truckers with connections to the Palestinian Authority can get work permits. According to the latest research, life for the average Palestinian in Gaza and the West Bank is substantially worse today than it was before the Palestinian Authority took control. Per capita income is down 25%, and there's 50% unemployment, mostly because Israel strictly limits the number of Palestinians allowed to work there. Prices for several commodities, from cigarettes and cement to flour and gasoline, have risen because these products are controlled by monopolies that are controlled by the Palestinian Authority.
Gradually, people start to feel that there is a new group of people who control power and money, and they enjoy everything, and we are becoming poorer and poorer and more miserable.
So it's not too difficult to understand why people resent a friend of Arafat, who's now a top official in the Palestinian Authority, building himself a multi-million-dollar mansion, and why when they see the sons and daughters of the elite driving around in expensive cars, the reaction is predictable.
Is this causing resentment among people here?
Yes, of course. Look what is happening to around us. This gives people a terrible feeling of alienation and bitterness and anger.
Where is it going?
The anger?
This alienation and anger.
Well, this is a difficult thing, because some people think that there will be an uprising against the authorities. No, it is not going to happen.
Most Palestinians agree, at least as long as President Arafat has all those cops and controls all the guns.
Our future is in the hands of one-man power.
Chairman Arafat.
Chairman Arafat.
Dr. Siraj told us that there is an alternative to one-man rule, and Palestinians see it regularly on Israeli television news.
For instance, on the Knesset, in the parliament, Israelis shouting at each other, criticizing the government. Nobody is hurt. That is unusual in the Arab world.
You can see all of this on Israeli television.
See this, yes. In the Israeli television, people criticize the government and nobody is killed. Or arrested. That was so amazing to us. Because what happens in the Arab world is that if you dare to criticize the leader or the king or the president or whatever publicly, you disappear.
We were surprised at the number of people we've talked to here who expressed anger, frustration, disappointment at what's happened since the Palestinian Authority took over. People said, we thought it was a dream come true, and in many ways it's been a nightmare.
Yes, they are looking for the heaven, but now it is too far.
What would you say to someone in America who would say, you know, the Palestinians complained for years and years that the Israelis tortured them, the Israelis oppressed them, and now they come to power and they torture their people and oppress their people. What would you say to somebody?
If an American asks me, or what?
If an American asks you that.
Should be clear. I want to be better than I am. I want that. But it's not easy.
In case you're wondering why some of the people you just heard from were willing to talk to us, frankly, so were we. Dr. Siraj said it was time to end the conspiracy of silence on Palestinian abuse of Palestinians. But there may be a price to pay. Several of the people we talked to were later visited or contacted by the Palestinian Authority.